Welcome, everyone, to the School of Radiance podcast. I'm your host, a humble human on a mission, here to help you both look and feel your best. So, I've been getting a couple of questions lately about peptides and hormones, and we have an incredible guest here. We have Lucas Aoun joining us today. And if there's anyone in the biohacking and health optimization space to speak to hormones, minerals, and peptides, it's Lucas. And Lucas has actually been on the show before, so he is a returning guest. And let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to get into a number of sort of like free ways to support your hormones and live better and look better and all of that. And also some super nerdy things on, what we can actually do and take to support our bodies, and also talk about peptides, because this is something that I've played around with and love some of the benefits, and just excited to share more with you in today's episode. So Lucas Aoun is known as Australia's leading biohacker. I would actually go so far as to say internationally, by the way. And he's followed by Dr. Andrew Huberman, Dave Asprey, and Ben Greenfield. These are all big names in the health optimization and biohacking space, in case you've never heard of some of those names before. And Lucas Aoun is an expert supplement formulator and has mentored by one of the world's best supplement formulators, Shawn Wells. You also have a background as a pharmacist and a background in pharmacy, so you really understand the composition of different hormones and different molecules and how they engage with the body and our own body's microbiomes. So welcome back to the show, Lucas Aoun. How are you today? And of course, what is radiance to you?
Rachel, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, so I would say with radiance, I would say it's a state of being that emits a positive energy and a nice sort of aura that attracts other people into your proximity.
Ooh, I like that. And let's go a little bit deeper here. So if you're thinking kind of radiance with both the masculine and the feminine, because we got, masculine and feminine in today's show, what would you say are some of the different qualities, and maybe getting into how our health and hormones can impact this, the way that we come across and the way that we're perceived in the world?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So if we're looking at the differences in the yin and the yang, if we look at the masculine energy and the masculine radiance that men emit, I would say the leading qualities there would be leadership, definitely strength, courage, um, and also being emotionally vulnerable as well. Let's not neglect that aspect, because I know a number of men these days think that in order to be super tough and to emit this strong radiant energy, that they must not show signs of weakness or vulnerability. So I think that is an important aspect there. And then if we look at like from the female women's perspective, that radiance would be more so like nurturing, soft, supportive, um, more emotionally connected, I would say, compared to most men, and also very, very like empathetic as well. So just having that delicate, soft, like emotionally empathetic mood.
Absolutely. So, because the show is about 25% male listeners and 75% female listeners, I'd love to kick things off with some information on hormones.
Mm,
Because for us to show up as our best version, our hormones have to be on point. Let's start off with testosterone.
mm,
Because when you speak to a man being able to be in that leadership position, accomplish things, put on muscle, and just like really have that strength and determination to accomplish goals and things like that. Testosterone plays a massive role in this. So, what are some of the things that listeners can start to do now to actually support a natural increase in testosterone?
It's a fantastic question, Rach, because we're seeing an epidemic, a decline in testosterone levels across the board, right? We're seeing it in even like very wealthy countries, lower lower capital index sort of nations and cities. So I think first and foremost, when it comes to testosterone, number one is there needs to be a belief that let's say for example, for men, they need to believe that their testosterone can actually increase. But in order to believe that, they need the right education and the right tools within their disposal to actually implement and actually integrate these changes into their lifestyle. So when we're looking at testosterone optimization, it is literally a lifestyle shift. And a lot of these like biohacks and interventions are actually specifically, a lot of them actually improve overall health. So a lot of the strategies and interventions that improve testosterone turn out to actually help with thyroid health, reducing inflammation, increasing nitric oxide, boosting dopamine. So there's many different interventions that men can implement right away to boost testosterone. The first pathway that I'd love to sort of unravel is the impact of nutrition. So it doesn't matter what your, I guess, like predefined understanding is around nutrition, and there might be some people that are quite like dogmatic about certain diets. I'm very much driven by like what does the evidence demonstrate and what does it show specifically as it pertains to testosterone optimization. And so it's become very apparent that there's certain types of fats, there's certain types of carbohydrates, and there's certain types of proteins that are best utilized to actually maximize testosterone. And so if we look at the different types of fats, it's most certainly not polyunsaturated fatty acids. So it's not canola oil, sunflower oil. You mean, you know these very well, Rach. It's more like grass-fed butter, coconut oil, avocados, macadamias, olive oil. Like these are the beneficial types of fats. Then if we move on to like, let's say, carbohydrates, I'd also like to mention here that we want to select the carbohydrates that are least problematic for men. So what I mean by problematic is that these carbohydrates should be easy to digest and break down. They can't be carbohydrates that are difficult, that irritate the gut. And when you irritate the gut, you release more serotonin, and serotonin dampens dopamine. Not many guys know that, but if they're eating foods that are actually triggering and inflaming the gut, then actually serotonin is increased, and that actually plays a negative role on dopamine. So I'd say lots of fruits, generally speaking. I think you're also a big fan of consuming fruit. So like berries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, like all of the berries. I'd throw in honey in the mix as well, and also delicious maple syrup. I mean, that tastes amazing. And then also, for some people, they'll be a little bit picky about gluten. But personally, I think if you're consuming a high quality organic sourdough bread, it tastes amazing. And most guys that I consult, like they can tolerate it completely fine. It doesn't cause issues. And then from like a protein perspective, I mean, unfortunately, it can't really be a vegan diet here, because the goal here is we want to maximize the amount of nutrients we get from food. And red meat is a superfood, and so are the many different organ meats as well. So, like liver, heart, kidney, spleen, testes, brain, these are packed full of nutrients without any anti nutrients. So, these are definitely, from a dietary perspective, that's how I'd sort of frame it.
Love it. And for carbohydrates, I typically stick with like a cauliflower. Like I do a lot of meat lovers pizza with like a pound of beef on one pizza, and then like a pound of chicken on the second pizza with 3 eggs on it. This is like my one of my favorite post-workout refuel dinners, and it's so good. So I find a cauliflower pizza crust works really well, a little bit of rice as well, but I really steer clear from sweet potatoes and
Yep.
potatoes. They just don't make me feel as good.
Mm.
And love that you mentioned blueberries. I'm also a huge fan of dates
Yep.
because they don't spike your blood sugars. There's actually been some research in diabetics consuming dates. I eat so much honey, I consume a ton of honey. And one of the reasons I do that is actually to have that glycogen in my system
Mm.
to actually help reduce cortisol because that can help with that. Because at the end of the day, what's disrupting our hormones is one of the root causes of so many things, which is
Mm.
stress. And that's why when a lot of times people are, say, investigating their testosterone levels, ladies, this applies to you too, like what to feed your family, cook together, of course, too. That's also fun. But it's really important to keep your stress levels in check. So even just a little bit of honey I find really helpful, or snacking on some dates throughout the day, and just moving a little bit slower, especially as women, to help reduce that cortisol because that messes with our estrogen, which when that goes down, collagen and elastin go down as well.
Mm.
I don't have a lot of raspberries. I find that blueberries work quite a bit better for me. So I'll do like
Mm.
blueberries with Greek yogurt and a little bit of honey on some buttermilk pancakes. I do love sourdough bread as well. I'm glad that you mentioned that. And instead of peanut butter, I'll go for like a pumpkin seed butter, grass fed butter, and honey on top. And that's really great. So, totally aligned with what you're mentioning here, too. And the funny thing is, if you go online and you look for natural ways to boost testosterone, you are going to find things online that say follow a vegan diet. But I mean, we need fat, we need cholesterol to actually create hormones, correct?
I'm so glad you mentioned that because one of my missions as part of my branding, ergogenic health, has been to present health information that you'll struggle to find on Google. That's always been like my motto and saying. And so, like as you mentioned there, if a guy these days is relying upon Google to find the answers that they're looking for, like they are going to be just number one wasting a lot of time and money on interventions that actually don't move the needle. So it's like, and obviously we know who runs the sort of search engine optimization sort of database. It's most certainly not going to feed them, no pun intended, not going to feed them my content, because I don't really have that sort of like level of authority in that sort of realm. But going back to what they recommend, so like a vegan diet, I mean, it's very evident right now that the vegan diet really is like void of really important minerals and also amino acids. So like it's going to be low in taurine, it's going to be low in glycine, it's going to be low in many of these essential components of food, including peptides that are not even well discovered in meats and organ meats yet. I mean, we're only just starting to unravel the beneficial effects of these organ meats on our biology. And a lot of people say that it's because they're rich in these fat soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, K. It's got awesome minerals and compounds like coenzyme Q10. But if I were to hedge my bets, in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll start to unravel and discover these hidden peptide components that are found in organ meats that actually upregulate enzymes in different or in the specific organ or the organ that actually drives the production of hormones. So yeah, from a dietary perspective, as also you mentioned dates, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I recently have started incorporating like more dates into my diet after seeing Thomas DeLauer's recent YouTube video talking about how if they combined dates with a high carbohydrate meal, like a meal that actually contains carbs, that the dates contain allulose, which is a type of sugar that actually lowers blood sugar, which is just absolutely incredible. So I've been incorporating like date syrup as well on certain recipes and foods, and yeah, sort of rotating between that and like maple syrup and honey, as long as it's real, authentic maple syrup and not on the packet that says maple flavored syrup. Like I completely got tricked the other day in the supermarket. It literally said maple flavored syrup, so it wasn't even real maple syrup. So yeah, you've made some great points there.
One of the things I really want to mention is I believe one of the tenets to being our most beautiful, radiant, healthiest versions, looking our best, looking our most attractive on the inside and out, is really through taking a purification approach. You will not find prepackaged food in my home aside from my buttermilk pancake mix that I made today, but I did put a scoop of unflavored beef bone protein in it and put some Greek yogurt and blueberries on top and a little bit of honey. And it was absolutely fantastic. So you can make certain carbs like this a little bit higher protein,
Mm.
but it's the purification approach. It's going back to basics, like eating like a caveman kind of thing. And you'd enjoy my freezer. I have tons of grass-fed beef liver here from Vancouver Island. And I actually ate a whole plate of liver, like a whole pack. It was like a pound of liver just as an experiment, because for those of you listening, Lucas and I are both biohackers, which means we modulate our environment to support our biology. And you've heard me talk extensively about biohacking and purifying your air, water, lighting, electromagnetics, eating the right foods for you by testing instead of guessing, and also detoxing things like yeast, fungi, mold, heavy metals, and parasites. I actually have to do another parasite cleanse because I can tell when I need to, because I'll get like, grumbly gut and stuff like that. And I do parasite cleansing either with agents or using frequency technology a couple of times a year when I feel like I need it. So it's really about getting that gut in check and starting with feeling your body first. And I would say doing that is going to be a more sort of natural lifestyle way before then maybe taking testosterone or for the ladies, hormone replacement therapy. So it's kind of funny how by boosting your man's testosterone by eating certain foods, which how you talk about eating is how I eat, when the man has higher testosterone, that's going to allow the women to actually feel more relaxed, feel in their feminine, because the guy's in that highly thinking, analytical, motivated, get stuff done, accomplish tasks, so that we can show up and feel that safety, feel like the man's got it from the leadership perspective. Some people get really triggered when I talk about these things, but having been on the flip side of that, when I actually couldn't trust the man's leadership and there was low testosterone, so I have that contrast. But no
Mm.
matter where you are at as a listener, do make sure that you are fueling your body appropriately. So, talking about peptides, I would love to jump into BPC 157. This is a peptide that I get asked a lot of questions about. Give us the rundown of sort of like the how, what, why of BPC 157.
Yeah, so I would say out of many of the different peptides that have been discussed in the biohacking space, and also just in the general wellness, anti-aging, longevity space, BPC 157 has definitely stood out to be one of the most popular ones, and for good reason. I mean, I would say I was one of the earliest ones to sort of research BPC many years ago, and I sort of picked it out as like, okay, this is going to be really hot in the next few years, and it turned out to be like so popular that I think at one stage, what the FDA might have like put it on the potential banned list or something, or they were considering it because you know it was achieving so much with such a such a specialized effect. So let's look at the actual compound itself. Now, BPC 157 is body protective compound. That's what the acronym stands for. Body protection compound 157. Now, it is actually derived from a naturally occurring protein in the gastric juice. So our stomachs produce this particular sort of peptide, and it's gained a lot of attention in the realm of healing leaky gut, reducing autoimmune related gut issues, and also assisting and accelerating the recovery of injuries, specifically like muscle, tendon, and or bone injuries. So the best part about BPC 157, and one of the reasons why I think it's so incredibly popular, is because it can actually be taken orally. It can be used orally, and that's what separates it from many of the other compounds that are designed to help with similar effects. A lot of the other ones, unfortunately, need to be injected. Now, I've got nothing against injectable peptides. I've recommended them and I've used them myself, but 95% of the population, I think Rach would also agree, are fearful and would rather not use a needle to achieve the desired outcome. They would rather take a serum, they would rather use a topical, they'd rather use a capsule, they'd rather use a powder, a liquid. So in this case, BPC 157 stood out to be really popular, that it is bioavailable if you take it in capsule form. So if you actually use it in a capsule, and we're looking at around 100 micrograms, not milligrams, about 100 micrograms all the way up to around 500 micrograms per dosage. So that's a pretty wide dosage range. Non-toxic, so it doesn't appear to have any toxicity related effects. In fact, initially what caught my eye was the unbelievable research on how they administered BPC 157 to rats and animals that had liver damage following ibuprofen or a painkiller sort of medication. So that was incredible research, how it actually healed and regenerated the liver following severe liver damage. And this would also be applicable in individuals who've had liver damage following other medications and also alcohol, which I know probably a very small percentage of your audience probably drinks alcohol. They use other things now, but that's still some pretty cool research.
I think that's fantastic. So the other thing that I've been playing around with is actually frequency for peptides. Because if we give our body certain frequencies, we can actually theoretically get a little bit of an upregulation of peptides. So peptides, like you mentioned, are already naturally occurring in the body, but sometimes maybe we might want to upregulate it. So there are some technologies that do claim to do this. And of course, on the show here, this is not medical advice. This is for educational purposes only. If you think you have a medical condition, you must seek the guidance of a licensed physician. I'm thrilled you mentioned autoimmune conditions, because in my last two research articles, I wrote one in 2019 and then I wrote one last year. So one was for biohacking, like a biohacking framework and what to start with to reduce inflammation and oxidative stress. And then I wrote a second one on nutrition and the skin. And I was going over Canadian federal data with mortality rates by type. And in 2019, deaths of unknown cause, which I then reached out for clarification from the publishing organization, and they said it's under the category of people who passed away without a diagnosis or before they could receive a diagnosis, which is under the category of autoimmune conditions. So we saw it double in 2019, and then we also saw it double again in 2022. So this is why this type of information to reduce inflammation on all levels by the way that we live, with our thoughts, with our energy, with what we choose to do with our time, with what we watch, what we listen to, what we do, what we eat, how we move, living our purpose. These are all key components to longevity and also having fun. We can't forget about the fun stuff too. And so thanks for mentioning autoimmune conditions, because this is super key. And also the concept of injecting peptides. So I did some trialing with peptides last year, and of course I rang you up, Lucas. I'm like, where do I get this stuff? What do you think I need to do? And so I did a trial with melanotan. This was actually when I was living with one of my girlfriends, Katie, and we got super tanned. So melanotan is cool because it was initially researched as a skin cancer drug, and it's not FDA approved, but there's a derivative of melanotan, because melanotan works on 4 different pathways in the body. It's actually for male enhancement and libido enhancement. That's PT141. So melanotan, if you've heard of that one, you'll see, bodybuilders that are super tanned, they're doing melanotan. And it also, I found, was really supportive for helping with digestion, and also made me a little bit darker. so I wouldn't burn as easily. And it also works on the central nervous libido center, which was kind of funny because I was single back then and, working on my own and all that fun stuff. And so there are some things that are approved and not approved. So BPC 157, yeah, had some flack earlier this year for being difficult to get. So I think it's great that we have a couple of options now. We don't have to just inject something. There is the capsule and the topical formulation. And, what Lucas has on his website is, I mean, you're a wealth of information on, so obviously at the end of the show, drop where people can get that information from you. But what are some of the products that you have that you formulated that can actually support maybe that upregulation of certain peptides?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to different compounds to actually support that pathway, I mean, if we're looking at some of the impacts of certain nutrients that we know of, I would say one particular one that's like received a lot of attention recently is a particular peptide called dileucine. So the dileucine peptide, um, for your audience, they're probably familiar with like essential amino acids. So like, and as part of that sort of framework, we've got the BCAA, so the leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Now, the leucine component has been studied heavily, specifically for increasing muscle protein synthesis and really responsible for triggering that mTOR signaling, which is muscle recovery and muscle building. Now, what's really fascinating about this new molecule that's, I would say, I think it was released literally just last year at some stage. It's called dileucine. So basically, what they've done is they've combined two leucine molecules, they've put them together, and the action and the impact of just combining those two molecules bound together, called a dipeptide, can actually make the effects much more significant and more pronounced in the human body versus just regular leucine. So this is what I love doing: is I love looking at compounds that can be either modified or reconfigured or redesigned or repurposed in a way to actually make them, number one, more potent, number two, change their effects, or number three is like make them yield a different outcome in the individual. And this is where dileucine really stood out as a particular molecule that was like, this has some really fascinating research behind how it can actually increase muscle protein synthesis to a much greater extent than just regular leucine. And so now your audience are probably wondering, what does that even mean? Like, what's the impact of having more protein synthesis? Well, think along the lines of faster recovery following workouts. So your reduction in DOMS or muscle soreness. Number two is theoretically accelerating muscle growth to a faster rate than just consuming regular leucine. And number three would be supporting just general responsiveness to activity that requires the regeneration of muscle cells. So following muscle breakdown, that's where this dileucine does appear to be pretty promising and more of an up and coming a compound.
Very cool. While you were speaking, I just decided to do a quick DuckDuckGo search because I don't use Google. And I was curious, what are the foods that are high in leucine? And as many of you know, I started working out again after 2 car crashes. I finally felt like I could get back to the gym and lift those weights starting in late August. And now we are in early December, depending on when you're listening to this. So I've been training about 5 to 6 days a week and lifting heavy and balancing the cardiovascular training with wind sprints, with cycling, and the strength and conditioning and the flexibility and stability side of things. And I've put on a pretty significant amount of muscle pretty quickly and just leaned out. So started with super high protein, kind of 90% carnivore, still having dairy and carbohydrates and things like that. And so I did that first and then added the weights and just noticed muscle going on quite quickly. And so just kind of taking a look at what some of the foods that can stimulate leucine, because I think it's really cool that there's a dileucine, there's a new molecule that's helpful. I do have the 7 to 8 year rule I like things to be available for the
Mhm.
general population for about 7 to 8 years before I'll really go near it. I learned that in the medical aesthetic side of things and not jumping on new trendy things, because we need that long-term research, not just from the companies, but on the general population. So I am excited to see some of the long-term research here. And of course, when you're a biohacker, you're a bit of a guinea pig yourself and try things out. So foods high in leucine, we have salmon, which I do enjoy once a week. We have chickpeas. I do not eat chickpeas because they are inflammatory and did not come across as being good for me to have in my biome gut test. There's also brown rice. I don't do brown rice. I do organic white jasmine rice instead of brown. I have a ton of eggs. I probably have anywhere from about 3 to 4 to 6 eggs a day. And then it also says soybeans. I don't have soybeans because they're typically a highly genetically modified crop and have a lot of estrogen in them, and I just don't love them. Then there's also nuts. I'm really picky with the nuts that I consume because nuts are pretty notorious for being having high mold content. And so it says the nuts here: almond, Brazil nuts, cashews. I do like Brazil nuts because of the component of helping to feed the thyroid, but you have to be very careful with your Brazil nuts. If you open a bag of nuts and it smells moldy, it probably is moldy, even if they're organic. So a little bit of iodine on the skin, a little bit of Brazil nuts is just helpful for feeding the thyroid. And I don't have almonds, don't do almond milk or oat milk or anything like that. Just go for the good stuff, the proper milk. And then beef. I have a ton of beef. In fact, I just ordered a huge obscene amount of beef to pack my freezer. And it's all local, grass fed, grass finished, pasture raised beef. So I do consume beef almost every day. So that makes sense that the ability for me to put muscle on pretty quickly was because I was having a ton of leucine in my diet. And then it got to this point where eating like that, very high protein meals after workout before going to bed, I just felt better and my body started to crave it. And if I didn't have a really high protein dinner, like say I went to my sister's and it was more just like veggies and carbohydrate, I just like my gut didn't feel great. And then I'd come home and, have like half a container of cottage cheese with honey or something like that. So the body just knows. So once you do this shift and you start to feel it accordingly, it'll just kind of keep telling you what it wants more of. And being like tuned in, I
Mm.
think is also part of being dialed in. And if we really want to be our best versions, look our best, feel our best, perform, and do what we're here to do, we do need to be dialed in. So, what are some of the things that you do, Lucas, to be dialed in that maybe you haven't really shared, but is kind of one of your behind the scenes sort of like secrets to being dialed in, creating great products, being a notable speaker in the biohacking space? What's one of your secrets?
It's a great question. I mean, I do a number of things that I think people would perceive as like, what the heck is he? What is he doing? Like he's weird. Like he's genuinely weird. But I would say that, well, first and foremost, something that really helps me be dialed in is, it's pretty basic, but I think a lot of people in the biohacking space or the optimizing energy space simply forget to do, and that is to track what they're supplementing and also track who they're hanging around. Like, it's just being pretty meticulous about like different interventions that you're actually trialing, because I can tell you this right now, there's literally hundreds of different supplements you could possibly be taking. There's hundreds of different peptides. Then you stack on top the fact that there's hundreds of different brands, thousands of brands, different brands, where not all brands are created equal, even for basic ingredients like taurine or L-tyrosine or like vitamin D or vitamin K2. Not all brands will subjectively feel the same, even though you think that it's just a marketing perspective. Like the label looks sexier on this one, it's like I get a better effect from this one. It comes down to like the purity of the product, which is something that we can discuss around my new supplement that I've released. And number two is around like some of the cofactors or the excipients. Sometimes they use fillers. I know you know this so well. That can actually alter and like almost like completely change your perspective on a certain supplement if it contains like a nasty filler. Because, like for example, titanium dioxide is a filler, not a filler, but it's like a constituent that they use around the coating of a tablet.
It's like an
That
anti-caking kind of
yeah,
product. Yeah.
yeah, that plus also starch. Sometimes they'll add like potato starch, and I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I'm really sensitive to potato starch, and
I
also
can't, I don't do potatoes either. It's like I notice it right after I have potatoes.
I
And like
feel
sure they're cozy in the winter, but my gut just goes like, oh, I don't like
yeah.
it.
Oh, I'm the exact same. I've told that many clients, please pull back on the potatoes because they irritate. They literally irritate the gut. Not, I don't know if it's because they're a nightshade or if it's because of the type of starch that's found in potatoes. They just irritate the gut. And when it irritates the gut, it literally irritates my mind and it just makes me go into it shuts down higher level thinking for me at least. Like basically it will just put me into a state of learned helplessness where I feel like all I want to do is go on the couch and just watch TV. And that's not what I need as a CEO, you know? So I stay away from these things, but how am I ever going to, how is an individual ever going to know, how is anyone ever going to figure out this effect? The only possible way you can do that is by tracking. You just need to do some basic level tracking and building that self awareness around different foods. You can do obviously gut health tests, you can do food allergy tests, you can do all that sort of stuff. But obviously, not everyone wants to spend thousands of dollars on that sort of technology. Therefore, the next best thing would be to just keep a log, a very basic log, to track your experiments. Because the other trap that you could fall into is you try like 5 different interventions at once, and then you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You say, "Nah, this I don't like this compound. I don't like it. It doesn't work well for me." You know, so that's something that I'd recommend.
Oh, I love that. In my membership, which is kind of where I share the things that I don't want to share publicly that I do, that really help me just show up as a beautiful, highly empathic, peaceful woman who's very dialed in, both personally and professionally. What you mentioned is kind of, there are some layers to what I do behind the scenes too. I'm really happy that you brought up kind of like the people that were around because we exchange biome information with people when we shake their hands, exchange breath, kissing, all of that. And so I think a great idea is to actually like shake hands and hug and be kind of closer to people whose health is on point. So you get that good exchange. Obviously, you don't want to like drain their health if you're unhealthy, things like that. So I think it's kind of fun. Like when we take this perspective of being very dialed in ourselves to both look and feel our best, it not only helps others feel better with our nervous system being more regulated, being less toxic, it has a trickle down effect. Then other people are going to see how we're living, not giving people the biohacking fire hose of all the things you learn here on the show, the School of Radiance podcast, and in 101s, tutorials, and membership. It's like just share one thing that's going to be helpful and constructive at a time. With testing, there are a couple of really great tests that the show isn't sponsored in any way, but if you go to my biohacking page, you will see the Viome test, which is like a couple $100, and it's a gut test. You can also take a look at your saliva and your blood, and then it gives you pretty great information to go from as to which foods could be supportive for you at this time. And so that's a great place to kind of test instead of guess. But the notice who you're around, that you feel more peace, that you feel more calm around, because that individual is going to be less likely to also raise your cortisol, which is going to interfere with your hormones and your mood and things like that too. So it's like the people who we're around have a direct impact on our hormones. And I do take a break sometimes from supplements. One of the things I do not take a break from though is magnesium. And I also noticed a few months ago that I was just like a little bit jittery when I was lifting weights. I was shaking a lot. And then I started to incorporate electrolytes, and that made a huge difference. There's the True Wild electrolytes on my biohacking page. Really like that one. And then there's also a pre workout that has 4 grams of creatine in it. So I really have enjoyed adding creatine for my mental acuity and also putting on muscle and feeling stronger. But I love what you said about the purity of the product. That's actually one of the unique perspectives that I have and you have with having our podcasts. We get to meet the people behind the companies. So I get to read, say, for example, you with what you say and how you present. And I've known you for a number of years now. And I like that. I don't like buying products from someone who I don't know who's behind the brand, right? Because there have been times when people have reached out to me to promote their products and they're super shady people. And so when you kind of get a read on somebody, I'm not going to talk about products that I wouldn't take myself. I think everybody on the show knows that. But yes, the purity of the products, we see this with skincare. We see, parabens and phthalates and fragrances added. Fragrances mess with your hormones too. If you smell it, it's in your brain. I do, however, use pheromones. That's super fun. And for those of you listening, I actually dropped one of my bottle of pheromones in my kitchen. And then I was in my office here, and then I went to my kitchen to grab a snack, probably like protein or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm super energized now. So we should do a follow up on some of those other things that we can take too. You're such a wealth of knowledge, Lucas. Do you have any final words for us here today?
Yeah, I'd say like one thing that I'm pretty good at doing is, I guess, like my level of awareness in this space is quite broad, but one thing I'm pretty good at doing is identifying like future trends and like what's going to like pop and hit for 2025. So probably by the time this episode does go live, it might actually be 2025. And I actually would love to make a prediction that there is a particular herb that is going to be extremely popular in 2025. And no, it's not shilajit, it's not ashwagandha, it's not rhodiola, it's not ginseng. It's going to be catwaba, spelt Catuaba, catwaba. It's a bit of it's a funny name, but if you go to Brazil and you ask anyone, have you ever heard of catwaba? They will all look at you and say, oh, you want to have a good time tonight. Is that right? You want to enjoy your night, or you want to get in a good mood. That was the very first herb that I came across about 5 years ago as like a true mood booster and aphrodisiac. And that was actually the very first supplement that I decided to start with as part of my new supplement brand, In Before. So that's why we have the name In Before, to try and be first to market. We're in before everyone else. So if people are interested in sort of exploring or dabbling with this new herb, we spent over a year sourcing high quality catwaba extract because it's a bark extract. And we sent it off to get it third party assessed and analyzed. And many of our samples failed that assessment. They actually came back as, this is fake. It's not even catwaba. It's not real. So we went through many different vendors, different suppliers, and eventually we found one that actually passed the third party assessment and proved to actually be catwaba. And that is what we're using today in my product called Catwa Pure. So Catua Pure, Catwa Pure. And that particular herbal extract, I believe, is going to help many people with low libido, both men and women, because it works on the dopamine system. And number two, it increases blood flow to the genital regions. So it actually helps with blood flow in that direction there.
Oh, sign me up. Yeah, I did a quick look on Catwaba, and it's funny you mentioned having a good time, obviously, because it helps with dopamine. And then I just did a super quick search here on verywellhealth.com. Anti-inflammatory, antidepressant, neuroprotective, antioxidant. I would say that pretty much anything that's going to reduce oxidative stress in the body
Mm.
is just simply going to allow the body to function the way it wants to function. That's why I take this perspective of purification of our environment and everything in our lives. So we're pretty aligned in that. And yeah, I love that you're forward thinking. I mean, I started doing Zoom calls, one on one calls with people across the globe because people were flying to see me back in 2017, doing Zoom calls for sessions in 2017. And people are like, why are you talking to somebody in a back room? So I'm similar with you, kind of seeing the writings on the wall. So I think this is fantastic. I'd love to get my hands on some as well. So we'll talk afterwards. Where can people find more about you? Because I know that you're a wealth of knowledge. You love educating people and definitely would trust the products that you're making.
Yeah, so the number one resource for people if they want to check out a lot of my content is on YouTube. If they just search Boost Your Biology on YouTube, I think we've actually officially hit over 1,000 video uploads on YouTube. So I've been grinding hard, like very, very hard, and creating an enormous amount of free health content. So people can definitely check that out and benefit from that greatly.
That's fantastic. Love that you're sharing things just to help people be better humans at the end of the day, right? The healthier you are, the better looking you're going to be also, and just a better human in general doing good things in the world. So
Mm.
it all starts with the basics. It all starts with your biology, reducing oxidative stress. And as we age, doing a little extra sometimes, especially with the world that we live in now with things added to foods and GMOs and things like that. So just a great wealth of knowledge here, Lucas. Love to have you back on the show a third time at some point soon. And I'll make sure I get this show out straight away. So thanks everyone for tuning in to the School of Radiance podcast. Been a pleasure having you here today. I'm sure that you learned some great information that's just going to help you kind of get a little bit more dialed in, even just like for free, some of the lifestyle things that we mentioned. Because when you're healthier, your partner's going to be healthier, your kids are going to be healthier, and you're going to excel in your personal and professional life and also look more beautiful and attractive in the process. Learn more about today's episode and ways that I can support you over at the schoolofradiance.com, where you can check out my skincare products that I created, the Always Radiant skincare line, and book your one-on-one, join my tutorials to learn how to use your products, and of course for the membership for the more behind the scenes practices that I do that help myself go through life with more grace and ease, and also the other members getting great results as well. All right, I will see you all again very soon right here on the School of Radiance podcast.